published to the city's YouTube page. Tonight we are joined by the mayor and city council. I will call the roll for the planning commission. All are present, and I will turn over to Mayor Severance so he may open the city council meeting and call roll. Mayor?
Good evening. Thank you. I will call this city council special meeting of October 24, 23 to order. And as already stated, this is a joint meeting between us and our planning commission, so look forward to it. I'm just gonna lean back in my chair and let Commissioner Plumley take off with it. So,
Thank you, Mayor.
I guess we should do a roll call. I think, are we all present?
Mayor, we are all present with the exception of Councilmember Munns, who has asked to be excused.
Okay. So should we have a motion to excuse? Okay.
Yes, thank
I'll
you.
entertain a motion to excuse Councilor Munns. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
I move to excuse Councilmember Munns.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to excuse Councilmember Munns. That motion made by Mayor Pro Tem, second by, yes, Mr. Hoffmeyer gets the second. Okay. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. Looks like that passes unanimously. Now I'll turn it over to Mr. Plumley.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll continue with our regular agenda. There will be no action taken on approval of minutes at this meeting. Previous meeting minutes will be reviewed at the Planning Commission's next regular business meeting, which will be on November 14th, 2023. At this time, we will open the floor for public comments. There were no previous comments, correct? Is there anybody in the audience this evening who would like to comment on any item not on our agenda for this evening? All right, seeing no comments, we will close the public comment portion and we will move on to the public hearing portion. For the public hearing portion, our Development Services Director, David Kuhl, will introduce our Principal Planner, Kat Kamak, our Senior Planner, Ray Lindenberg, and our Senior Planner, Dennis Lefevre. They will review the countywide planning policies, accessory dwelling units and residential density standards, and the central development area. We are asking that everybody keep their questions, write down notes, and prepare your questions for the end of the presentation so that presenters this evening may get through the information. David?
Thank you, Chairman Plumley, and thank you, Mayor, for graciously joining us for this joint meeting. We haven't had a chance to do this a lot, but I think this is an important chance to share ideas and information on some big topics coming up for the planning staff. First off, though, I'd like to introduce to you our newest planning commissioner, Kelly Beadle, this is her first meeting. So thank you for joining us. We're going to have Ray Lindenberg, Dennis Lefevre, and Kat Kamak present. They like to present from their offices because they have a lot more resources down there. They can share maps and different tools as we go along. So if during the meeting tonight you have a desire to see a map or something else, just go ahead and ask and we'll make sure we get that up on the screen. So tonight, CAC is going to start it off. He's going to talk about the countywide planning policies. Ray's going to follow that with housing topics. At a previous meeting, you asked me to come back and talk about the multifamily tax exemption. So I have a little information on that. And then we'll move on to the central development area. And then CAC will be coming upstairs here at that point so you can meet him and talk to him as well. So go ahead, CAC. I think it's up to you.
David, this is Joshua Engelbrett. Would this be a good time for us to discuss?
Sure, why not? Why don't you go ahead?
Cool. So this is Joshua Engelbrett, Commissioner. Point of order, I guess, or for the record, myself, Commissioner Bonson, are employees for the town of Coopeville, Island County. We work on the countywide planning policies at a staff level, and so we are expecting to remove ourselves from this discussion, observe for those specific items, just so no conflict of interest exists. So.
Thank you for that. That's appreciated.
All right. Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is a great opportunity. What we're going to cover tonight, as David mentioned, we have a lot of information, important information that's pivotal in how Oak Harbor grows into the future. And so we would like to share this information with you. We'll go through some slides and share as much information as we can. And if you have questions, thoughts, comments, just to make a note of it, and we'll be happy to come back at the end and address it, primarily because we just have a lot of information, and you could go down the rabbit hole on any of the topics that we have coming up today and spend a lot of time on it, because these are big, large, impactful topics. But our goal is to try and provide you with as much information as possible. And if you have any doubts, we can dive further in. I'm going to apologize ahead a little bit if you see me wave my hand or something. My lights go out in my office, if I don't move very often. So nothing to be alarmed about, but I'll be trying to get the lights back on. We're going to switch presentations between me and Ray as we go through. And we'll try to go at a pretty good pace, try to keep things flowing, and then come back for questions. So I am going to start my presentation by sharing my screen and for the slides. What I'd like to just let you know is what we're going to cover today. There's so many things going on in the city. There's a lot of great ideas. There's a lot of development potential. The state has a lot of mandates. So we're at an exciting time where we can look at these as challenges, or we can look at them as opportunities. And I see these as opportunities and a chance for Oak Harbor to make a difference in the area and for itself. So what we're going to do, because we have so many topics of discussion, I'm going to try and cover this from a logical perspective under a comprehensive plan amendments. I think that is the biggest document, biggest topic that we can have in the city, and anything we do as a city is under that umbrella. So if we start there, I think we can group our ideas and thoughts or categorize them appropriately. So with that, without further ado, I will share my screen, and we can jump right into it. So give me a moment here. Okay, I hope you can see that. Somebody give me a thumbs up. All right, thank you. I'm gonna see it. Okay. All right, we're gonna jump in. The topics that we'll be covering today is basically the 2023-24 and the 25 comprehensive plan amendments. At least that's kind of the umbrella under which we're going to be talking about these various topics. So a lot of work that we're doing in 2023 currently under a comprehensive plan amendment process is going to flow into 2024 and will also contribute towards the 2025 update. So if people are not familiar with Growth Management Act for Washington State, the state allows a city to amend its comprehensive plan only once per year. And so we have a process that's set up to go through these amendments every year. GMA also has periodic updates where it says every 8 years or every 10 years, and these time spans have changed over the last decade or so, where the state requires that the cities also update or do a major update to the comprehensive plan. So what this allows the state to do is have points where it can interact with the local jurisdiction to address statewide issues and local issues. And these major updates and amendments are a way to try and get everybody in the region with the county and other cities and with the state to all be consistent and sync and to sync with each other in terms of goals and objectives. So I'm going to start off with the 2023 comprehensive plan of amendments, the work that we're doing currently, a lot of which will overflow into 2024 and will be part of the 2025 major update. So there's a flow to this. So I'm going to start with 23 and then we'll move on and hit most of the topics that we have on the agenda. So jumping into the 2023 amendments. So what do we have in our current amendments or in our current docket? We have the active transportation plan. We'll go into each of these topics a little bit just to get a 30,000-foot level of where the project is, where the status is, and then we can come back later if anybody has questions. So active transportation plan, I think the council and the planning commission is aware that we have undertaken it this year. The process is almost coming to the tail end. We have a draft plan for consumption. So we'll get into that a little bit more in our next slide. We also have alternate street connection plan in our docket, and this is an engineering initiated effort. This is a kind of a subset to our transportation plan, where our engineering division wanted to look at intersections within the city of Oak Harbor and see if we can come up with alternate design that would be effective in terms of cost and efficiency. And so there's I'll touch upon some of the ideas. This is a work in progress. It's not ready for any action this year, but we can see some ideas develop probably in the next year or two. We also have the land use changes, PIP to PBP. If the council and planning commission remembers, a couple of years ago we combined the industrial land use into one section. And so we are now collapsing the planned industrial park and planned business park into the industrial zoning category. This simplifies the zoning ordinance for everybody, and it also simplifies the use table. This is an implementation. It's actually in progress right now. We have letters out to property owners, and we'll be scheduling hearings and so on to take care of this. So this is in progress, and we'll go over it a little bit more in the next few slides. We also have the capital improvements plan. This is something that we do annually. We update it. We update schedules, we update project costs and so on, and do any budget amendments if necessary. This is on track for this year, and we'll probably make a minor amendment to the CIP. And I'll go over some of the changes that we're considering this year as it moves forward. The JPA UGA, this is also a topic that's in progress. This is largely going to be a topic that we'll discuss tonight. The countywide planning policy kind of falls under this topic. We'll dive into that in a little bit. We also have the housing action plan implementation, and this is also in progress. If you remember, we did density changes, we did accessory dwelling unit code amendments, and we've done some other housing related changes in order to implement the housing action plan. We have more amendments that are in discussion. If the council remembers, the MFTE program is part of that implementation. We'll touch upon that a little briefly tonight. We also have some recent legislature that have been passed that impacts our density and our low density residential districts. And we'll touch upon that. Ray will touch on those topics a little later in the presentation. So, and then we have the downtown marina redevelopment. This was on the 2023 docket. This is slowly evolving, and the scope is kind of morphing a little bit to what council or planning commission may currently know as the CDA, or the Central Development Area. So this is still a work in progress. Again, we'll have a little more information and some discussion on this as well later in the presentation. All right, active transportation plan. So just a few more details on each of those topics that are on the 2023 docket. Again, the draft plan is out for public consumption. It's on the city's website. If anybody hasn't seen it, I would highly recommend going and taking a look at it. Let me see if I can bring up a copy of it for just your, can you see the plan? Any thumbs up? Oh, yeah, okay, you see it. Okay, great. So you see the cover of it. This is the draft. I downloaded this a few minutes ago from our website. It has a lot of good information on it. And I would recommend, it's got a few easy chapters to read through existing conditions. There's some good maps in there that shows all the existing levels of stress that we have at intersections. But it had a great public input process. We had a steering committee and we had several outreach efforts. And it builds on existing plans. And so I would highly recommend taking a look at it. It's coming together really well. And what we have is projects. We have some projects that will come out of this effort. And you may be interested in knowing what those projects are and may want to take a look at it. This is, they have a bike network, pedestrian network projects, and they also have some catalyst projects that they suggest. We have 9 currently that are being recommended. And this is a plan of how these networks can connect with each other. We wanted to make sure that they all connect with each other so that we're not left with bike paths or these networks just ending up putting you onto roadways without any safety measures. So a lot of thought went into this plan. So take a look at it. What will be coming in the near future is to get do the public hearing for this and go into the adoption process. We are currently working with the consultants and they're developing some striping plans for the projects that we have on our catalyst. We have sufficient dollars to do maybe 3 to 5 projects for detailed striping plans, which is pretty good. And once we get those, we'll go into the adoption process, and then we'll start into the post-production to get the plan produced and website material. I'm expecting that we adopt this plan early in 2024, give us enough time to build, to make all these striping plans and bring this forward. I think this will be exciting for Oak Harbor. A few of these projects implemented will change some of the corridors that we have in the city. There are some traffic circles that are being proposed along some of these pathways. And so those are all exciting things that people are now in Washington getting used to. And we're getting some of those features here in Oak Harbor as well. So please take a look at it. And if you have any questions or comments on it, feel free to give me a call. We'll be coming forward again, like I said, for public hearing and adoption in the next 2 to 3 months. Alternate street connection. This is, again, the engineering-led effort. So this is just to give you an idea of some of the things that our engineers are considering. Roundabout concepts for different intersections along Highway 20. We know we're going to have a project in the near future to improve Highway 20, and we want to make sure that Oak Harbor is in a position to advise the state in terms of what Oak Harbor wants in its community. And I think these roundabout concepts, if our engineering department can come up with these concepts, it'll be a great segue into the design that the state will eventually do for the corridor. Some of the other connection and network designs that we can do is for road connections in areas that we currently don't have sufficient network connections. You can remember the Gun Club Road along with Harbor Heights. The road connections are not all complete, and so there are ways to try and make and bring connections there. So if we have a concept for these various areas, then as development happens, we can try and take the opportunity to make some of these connections. So this is just an example. Again, no action needed. We don't have anything firm yet, but this is on our docket, and our engineering division is continuing to work on it. Excuse me. This again, the land use change is also on our docket, and as I said, we are in progress in implementing this. We have notifications that went out in October. We'll do the SEPA process and hearing in January and February, and this will be a very easy change and a very a good change for Carver's industrial zoning districts. Giving us more opportunities, or giving property owners more opportunities and a variety of uses to explore as they plan for development on their lots. And then we have the CIP. Again, as I mentioned, we are in progress to do our annual amendments. What are some of the changes that are being considered with this year's amendment is some retitling of projects. Like, as I mentioned, the downtown marina plan may be retitled as a central development area. We're making some minor schedule changes based on what we know in terms of schedules and funding. We also have some additions that is being recommended as part of this year's CIP, and in the street section we have a project added to the very end of the planning period 2029 to look at Pioneer Way, this section between SR20 and City Beach. Trying to stay ahead. That's a project that has always been on the city's radar. So it's now in the CIP, at least is tracking in the outer fringes of the 6-year window. And under parks, there's a couple items that were added. We need to update our park plan. It's reaching the end of its lifetime. If we want to stay valid for grants and so on from RCO, we got to update that plan. So we have that added, and then an urban forestry management plan. Again, trees are a big asset for Oak Harbor, and it's good to manage those along with the Gary Oaks that we have. So it'd be good to have a comprehensive plan to manage that. And then I talked about the retitling the CDA. I think there's some changes that we'll see there as well. So we are currently drafting the CIP. We are pretty close to having a draft document. We'll probably do the SEPA in November and December, and then hopefully adoption in January and February. JPA UGA. So this is a very popular topic for both city council and the county. This has been on the docket since 2020. The city council over the years has expressed its interest in considering boundary changes to accommodate the growth pressures. So this is on our current docket, and this topic and its discussion and anything we discuss underneath this will likely lead to the 2025 update. The countywide planning policies are a big part of that. We touched on some of the amendments to this document at a workshop early summer, but now we're getting close to actually bringing something concrete in terms of looking at actual amendments to consider. So the countywide planning policies are worked on by a group of planners from all jurisdictions within the county and the city. And this group has been meeting for the last 6 to 8 months. A great group of people working, a lot of great ideas coming from this because, as I mentioned, there's a lot of requirements from the state that's coming down to the county and the city. And there are several challenges in tackling these. And we have a great group of people that are looking at all the challenges and trying to do the best in providing options for the community to choose from, and we'll go over some of those challenges in the next few slides. So any changes we do to the countywide planning policies, which is the basis for everybody in Island County updating their comprehensive plan. So any amendments we do in the countywide planning policy impacts everybody's comprehensive plan, county and the cities. And so this is a very big step in the major update process. So what are some of the changes that are being considered in the countywide planning policies? There's some minor changes such as terminology and consistency. One of the main reasons that the state wants all counties and cities to have these countywide planning policy is consistency. And so that is the big thing that we're trying to make sure that we achieve in Island County, is to try and make sure that terminologies and everybody's comprehensive plans are consistent with each other, and that we are talking about the same thing. So there are some discrepancies currently, and so we're looking at trying to make them consistent. We're also trying to accommodate the requirements of the state law. A lot of legislatures being passed regarding housing that impacts everybody. And so these policies are going to be captured in this document. So we'll have some policy changes. And then the housing allocation is a big thing. So I'm going to kind of wait on that a little bit, and I'll expand on housing allocations in my next slide. The housing allocation and how we get to allocating the housing, which is what the HAP tool is going to be part of the amendment this year. And this, we'll get into it a little more detail in the next few slides. And anything that we do with these allocations is also going to impact our buildable lands analysis. And so there are some exceptions that we're also going to be looking at when we look at the amendments. So housing allocations. So just to go back to a little bit of maybe history in terms of how GMA operates and how it compares to maybe other states. This is just a side thought. So Growth Management Act is a state mandated planning effort. And this is primarily there are very few states in the United States that have state mandated planning. In states that don't have this, cities and counties have their own rules. They make their own plans. They determine when they need to be updated. They determine their own population projection, how they plan for housing, and so on and so forth. And this could be good or bad based on how fast your state is growing. Cities can be cannibalizing each other or fighting for territory if you don't have rules, etc. So in Washington, the Growth Management Act serves as a way to kind of mediate and spread the planning effort throughout the entire state and have it more coordinated. So with this effort comes a lot of coordination, consistency requirements, etc. So in the past, what Washington has said as a state is, okay, you need to plan for your population growth. So whatever your population is going to be in 20 years, you need to make sure that you have housing and zoning and so on to meet your the population projection that you anticipated to get. And it didn't have any more details. So all cities and counties went through their system of however they wanted to do their population projection, and they would try to plan for it. Well, all these methodologies were a little different, and so they were inconsistent. So the state then had the Office of Financial Management produce projections for everybody in the state, and so there was some consistency in the methodology. So this is a system that's been in Washington state for the last decade or so, where the Office of Financial Management says, this is your population projection, and they do it for all the statewide, all cities and so on. But what they do is they give you a range. They give you a high, medium, and low, and they say the choice is yours. We'll do the projections, we'll tell you what the ranges are, but you as a local jurisdiction can pick what population that you want to plan for based on whatever local circumstances. And that's how we were doing most of our planning till today. And so you plan for a population growth, and the population was assigned mainly on trends, who's growing at what pace and how are you planning to grow ahead. And so you did the planning in that way, and you let the city organically kind of grow based on this large planning policy. So now the state is coming back and saying, well, that is still not working. We're still not getting the number of housing units that we need for our population growth. There are still a lot of archaic zoning regulations and rules that are preventing growth from keeping pace with the population growth. So the state is passing a lot of housing bills and so on to try and have cities and counties have the means to accommodate this growth in population that the state is experiencing. So what they have done this time around is said, instead of just giving you a population projection to plan for, they're saying, okay, we're going to focus on housing. And just like how the OFM would give you the population counts, they are now saying, we're going to give you the number of housing units that you need to provide over the next 20 years. And not only do you have to provide the number of housing units that we're going to allocate to each county, we're also going to require you to identify how each income level in various jurisdictions is going to get the housing for their income level. So this is a big deal. So it's not only that you have to accommodate the housing that is being allocated to the county, you also have to show how housing is provided for your lower income folks, your median income folks, and your higher income folks, and what the percentages are and where they're going to be. So this is a change from just organically allowing cities to grow to actually requiring some really firm planning and providing options for the 20-year population projection. So you get to the state is prescribing a certain process that the county and the local jurisdiction will have to follow, but within this process there are some choices that the local jurisdictions have, and these choices are what we need to consider carefully, and that's what we're kind of trying to inform you about, some of these local choices that we have that can impact how growth happens within Island County. So housing allocation. So this is just an excerpt from, there are links that I've provided in our report, and feel free, there's some of these, you can go down the rabbit hole for a lot of these websites. There's a lot of information out there, and Commerce is still providing more and more information as we speak for the 2025 update. But basically what I wanted to kind of point out in this slide is the income brackets. Here, the housing units by income brackets and the AMI, or the area median income. So what the state has done is not only allocate how many units each county should accommodate, but how many units in each income level you should accommodate. So they are getting pretty detailed in terms of the type of housing they want to see and the quantity of the housing they want to see. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you actually what the tool looks like and how the countywide planning group is working or is trying to come up with a good foundation and a methodology on how to use that tool for Island County. So I'm going to switch over to a spreadsheet, which is what the state is recommending that all jurisdictions use for determining how much housing they should provide in for the next 20 years. And I think, and I'll come back to this slide to show some comparisons. So, can you see an Excel spreadsheet? Thumbs up. All right, thank you. All right, so this is a spreadsheet that the state has given us, and seems fairly simple. It says, okay, select which county you're in. So we can go in and you select Island County. And we are doing a 2025 update, a 20-year update. So we want the projection year for the 2025 update, 20-year projection to 2045. So we'll be doing a 20-year update, so our projection is 2045. So as soon as you select the year, now OFM has projected what our population ranges should be. So we have a choice as Island County to choose either the low, medium, or high. Now we already have policy direction in our existing countywide planning policies to select medium. That has always been the last couple updates. Just choose the medium. We have no reason to go low because 83,501, which is the low projection, would be, it means that Island County would lose population over the next 20 years because we're already, I think, close to 80,000+ now. So that doesn't make sense. There's no reason really to select the high. We don't have any big changing factors in Island County that leads us to choose high. So medium seems to make sense, and that's what's in our countywide planning policy. So if we select medium and we enter the population here, immediately it kicks out a table that shows how many housing units we need to provide for that population. So according to this tool, if we select to plan for the medium population projection, and I'll focus on just the numbers here in the totals. Well, they go into further detail and tell you how many units you need for every income level. And so this gets complicated, and then how do you divide that within Island County? So they have the tools for that, and I won't go into it too detailed, but what I want to really show you here is just the basic on how do we get 8,717 units, which is, according to the state, is what we need for our median population projection for 2025. So that's the number that Island County needs to accommodate in the next 20 years. So, go back to my presentation. Okay, so Island County population medium, 102,000, countywide housing needs, that's the number 8,717. And this is how it needs to be allocated. And these are the quantity of housing in each income bracket that we need to accommodate or shoot for or plan for according to the state. And we need to kind of show it really on a map or on somewhere how we're going to accommodate 8,717 units. Now, just to get a scale for what is 8,717 units, we need some comparison for that. And I just wanted to throw some stats out there just to get ourselves in terms of scale. So Island County's population in 2010 was 78,000. In 2020 was 86,000. 2030, 2040, it's clicking. The OFM population is kind of doing it's a linear extension. So every year, every 10 years, we are growing by about 8,000 to 9,000 people. And that's the trend that they're showing till 25. So I just wanted to show that. in terms of the total housing units that we have in Island County, so it's a little different numbers shown in the census as opposed to shown in the HAP tool by OFM. The census has 42,800 or so units in Island County for 2022. And the HAP tool, which we were just kind of seeing, says that in Island County, there's 37,000 units, 272. Now, all these data centers collect the information from different sources in different ways. So we'll always see some misalignment between these numbers. But this is just the scale. So you can say, there's around 40,000 units in housing units in Island County, if you want to just kind of round it up for mind's ease and simplicity. And then if you look at the number of units that we are required to accommodate over the next 20 years, you can see that it ranges between 25 to 30% of that total housing units. So again, according to HAP, how many, if we look at the breakdown of the housing units in each of the jurisdictions, we have most of the housing units are in the county. 25,445. Oak Harbor has about 10,000 units, Cookville about 1,000, and Langley about 740. So this is the unit distribution in Island County. I wouldn't say that this is necessarily, if you look at Washington State and you look at all the counties, most of the populated counties along the I-5 corridor, you'll have the county population will be much less than all the jurisdictions, the incorporated sections. And if you go into Eastern Washington, more of the rural, then you'll have the opposite. You'll have the county's population more than most of the incorporated areas. So, Island County, I wouldn't say is unique necessarily, but in this area, for example, Skagit, the incorporated areas are much larger than the actual unincorporated parts of the county. So just to give you an idea, so the county has most of the population, has most of the units, and in terms of under the GMA, that is not necessarily a good trend. The county doesn't have necessarily all the services, and it doesn't probably have the affordability factor that everybody's looking for in the county. So even though the current population, a large population resides in the county, we should look into the future to try and keep that rate of growth in the county less and have the jurisdictions that actually have services like sewer and water actually take on the growth and provide the services. And I think that's what GMA is trying to achieve. So in trying to assign 8,717 units between all these jurisdictions is quite a challenge. The countywide planning group is working hard and doing a really good job, and we are very close to having recommendations on how to split these numbers between the various jurisdictions using census data and some firm methodology that could be replicated maybe into the future. So we're trying to come up with the best options for you as Planning Commission and City Council to make a good decision on how do you see these allocations moving forward, because these will all have impacts on how Oak Harbor and the region grows. So, this is, I kind of summarized this slide as I was discussing the last slide is, if we go with the existing trend, it goes against GMA. County gets the most allocations, and, they don't have necessarily all the services, and it's also an environmentally unfavorable decision to try and keep the trend with Island County growing faster or more than any of the jurisdictions. So the proposal with the countywide planning policy changes is to try and change that trend and base it on employment, which will then start to push more of the allocations towards Oak Harbor and less in the county. And we'll kind of work with those numbers to hopefully try try and have some recommendations for you in the next month or two. So what can we expect when we go through this process of amending the countywide planning policies and using the state tool? At least for cover, what can we can expect higher housing allocations. How much? Well, potential for almost 50% plus growth. So if you look at the previous slide, I think I have the housing counts here. We have about 10,000 units in Oak Harbor. If we can expect at least 5,000 of these 8,000 or so units to be allocated to Oak Harbor, because Cookville, Langley are very constrained in terms of how much they can grow. And of course, we want to try and limit the development in the county. And so Oak Harbor by default is the candidate that is likely to take the largest allocation. And so, and that's a big deal because Oak Harbor is the biggest city, has all the services, but yet it is a significant allocation. And therefore, it is a significant growth change. Again, like I said, these are all opportunities going into the future for Oak Harbor. It will impact our land capacity analysis, which we have to do for our 2025 update. How do we provide for all these housing in the next 20 years? We have to look at redevelopment opportunities, and we have to look at green development as well. We definitely have to look at how to increase our housing production. We have done a lot of things in the development services division to get our workflow all smooth, and projects are going through online permitting system. We're trying to do our best from a city organization side to be more efficient, to handle a lot more of development proposals and so on. But where is the housing actually going to come from, and what is going to be the pace of development that we should expect over the 20 years if we're to meet these allocations? So a 5,000, and this is just an example of 5,000 unit allocation or more than that in the next 20 years. If you just divide that by 20, you're looking at 250 to 300 units per year. That's kind of the pace that you want to look at over the next 20 years. Even in our boom years, Oak Harbor is doing maybe an average of 70, 80 permits. And so that is a very significant jump in the number of units that we'll be considering and the development potential that we'll be considering. So that is just to give you a scale of what is possible with this allocation, and what Oak Harbor can or should be prepared to take on over the next few years as this allocation becomes more and more concrete and we adopt those policies. So again, just to summarize the countywide planning policies, I know I touched a lot on, and we'll come back to this at the end of the presentation for more discussion. But it is the foundation for a major update, and we're looking just to amend the countywide planning policies. We'll look at drafts coming in November, December. We want to get these things done soon so that we can jump into our 2025 comp plan update and start to work on that, because that's a lot of work. So we're trying to see if we can do a lot of this before the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Ray, who is going to touch a little bit on the housing topics, because how this is all part of this entire comp plan discussion. And I know we've talked about housing in separate workshops and meetings, but they all fall under this umbrella. So we'll touch base on this, and there's a lot of new ideas here as well. So turn it over to Ray.
Thanks, CAC. I'm going to actually go ahead and take over the presentation too, if I could, because I got a couple things I want to share here before we get back into it. So
let me stop sharing.
Right. Thank you. I'm going to start off in the same place, so everybody's going to see the exact same thing as you just saw a minute ago, but we'll continue from there. So CAC has brought up a lot of kind of almost sea change kind of things as far as the way we've done development in the city of Oak Harbor. There's going to be changes, and they're going to be, kind of scary to some people, and not necessarily the old Oak Harbor way. And so there's going to be a little bit of a shift in philosophy if we are to meet the standards that have been kind of given to us by the state. So there are a few options that we have for moving forward. One of those is dealing with density and how it exists in existing zone districts and how it will move forward in the future. And then we have some discussion of zone consolidation and other options for dealing with density. But what I wanted to do is kind of throw up on the screen here some visualization aids. And it's one of those things that, we talk about density, and it is kind of a scary thing because we hear, you have to have X number of units per acre, or, this many units on each piece of land, and et cetera. And it kind of, freaks people out. And it's a reasonable kind of thing to feel like, all of a sudden there's going to be an 18-story apartment building next to you or something along those lines. That's not what we're proposing here. So let me get that out of the way from the very beginning. That's not coming to Oak Harbor. That's not going to be something that we would likely be dealing with. So what we have here is a book that was published about 15 years ago called Visualizing Density, and it's a really good resource. I recommend that you take a look at it if you have a chance. But I'm going to go through like a few photos here and kind of give you an idea of what it is we're dealing with. When we talk about units per acre, obviously that's one housing unit per acre of land. An acre of land is 43,560 square feet. So your typical 7,200 square foot lot in the city of Oak Harbor is going to be around 4 units per acre or so, based on having roads and utilities and things like that. So when you look at aerial photos, you see densities of less than 1 unit per acre. That's very, very low density, and it's not something you would see in the city of Oak Harbor. When we go up to 2 and 3 units per acre is a little bit more of what you might expect to see in a suburban kind of development or a small town. We move a little bit higher into the 4.5 units per acre, and you start to look at, maybe including some duplexes and some cluster development and things like that, like you see in that middle photo there that's in Kansas City, Kansas. Tampa on the left-hand side, you see some townhomes starting to creep in, smaller lot, single-family residential, and I say smaller in kind of quotation marks because they're probably still 6,000 to 7,000 square feet. You get into the 4 to 5 units per acre, you see the original Levittown in New York that was kind of the blueprint for suburban development in the country. Start to move up a little bit over 5 units per acre, and it starts to get into truly smaller lots like the one in Longmont, Colorado here. And moving, sorry, I'm clicking the wrong thing there. I've got too many screens in front of me. Moving up to 7 to 8 units per acre is more of your kind of traditional urban subdivisions or urban neighborhoods that you might see in kind of closer into downtown areas, Boise, Idaho on the right-hand side there. Getting closer to downtown, your kind of bungalow neighborhoods and things like that. Portland, Oregon at 8.9 units per acre on the left-hand side there. And then we start to get in a little bit more dense, a little bit closer spaced. Chicago, you have your 9 units per acre on the right-hand side. Moving up over 10, you start to get into fourplexes and apartment complexes, those sorts of things. We see 15 to 16 units per acre, and that's where it starts to get a little bit more dense. You see the one on the left-hand side, kind of typical row houses. They all have their own yards in the back, but they are connected together. The one in the middle, kind of a traditional apartment building. Something you can keep in mind here is our maximum density that we have stated in our R4 zone district is 22 units per acre. And that is something that we have not really fully realized in most of our projects recently. For some reason, developers haven't seemed to really want to go for that maximum density. So most of the projects we've done lately have been a little bit less than that. We've had a few that have come close. 18 to 19 units per acre, again, you're strictly into apartment complexes. You have stacked flats like on the left-hand side there, they're 18 units per acre. And then this one skips up to almost 30 units per acre, and those are strictly in the realm of apartment buildings, at least 3 to 4 stories in general. And then you kind of go from there. The one on the left, 49 units per acre. The most dense project that we are looking at right now that is hopefully soon to be under construction is the Bayview Vista project, which is right down the street here at the corner of Ely and Barrington, is going to be about 48 units per acre. And that has surface parking and a 4-story apartment building. That is the most density that we've had here. And the reason that we've allowed that is because it's in the CBD 2 zone district, or CBD 1, I can't remember which, honestly, but our CBD zone districts do not have a maximum density on residential, which has been kind of a boon for that particular development. However, again, it hasn't been really taken advantage of in many projects. Our entire CBD area has that same lack of restriction, if you will, and unfortunately nobody's really taken advantage of it yet, but we're hoping that that is something that could be upcoming in the future, because it's existing services, existing urban neighborhood that has access to transit and your kind of day-to-day activities, post office, grocery store, all those sorts of things, which is what you want. And it will encourage people to not necessarily have as many vehicles, which is honestly one of the limiting factors on development of projects like this, is how do you fit the parking in? Because parking costs a lot of money, and it costs a lot more money when you have to put it in underneath a building or in some sort of parking structure or garages, et cetera. So that is kind of a limiting factor there. Getting back to the slides there. So one of the things we can look at is how do we get there, is increasing density in existing zones. And that's something that we did with our most recent residential zoning revisions, was to increase the density by reducing the or I should say, eliminating the minimum lot size. There is still a de facto minimum lot size in our residential zone districts of 3,200 square feet. But it used to be 7,200 square feet in the R1 zone district. And so in theory, that would double the density when you have a lot that's half as large. In practice, whether or not that will truly bear out, it remains to be seen at this point. We've had a couple of subdivisions come in under the new regulations, taking advantage of smaller lots. And so there will be, more density, a little bit closer together. And that will be a little bit of a change for folks when they see those being developed in the city. The other thing that goes along with that is right now our density standards for the R1 zone districts are 3 to 9 units per acre. We increased that. It used to be 3 to 6 units per acre. We had to allow for those smaller lots. And so one of the things that a lot of planners have been talking about, we went to the APA, American Planning Association Washington Conference over in Spokane a couple weeks ago. And a lot of cities are looking at not having any kind of density standards at all. Essentially what they have are standards for the construction of the house itself or the building itself, and those having to meet building code standards and certain setbacks, and having the accoutrements of modern living, whether that be parking and open space and things along those lines, but not specifying a density standard. And in that situation, that brings up the concept of possibly investigating a form-based code. And the form-based code essentially kind of outlines what a building might look like on the outside and how it's located on a property, what the height limits are, what your setbacks are, and all those sorts of things. But it doesn't necessarily specify what's going on inside that building. One of the concepts that I saw in the conference was the use of a floor area ratio. If you have a floor area ratio that says you can have, say, 4,000 square feet of building on a property, then that ordinance says that it doesn't matter if you have one 4,000 square foot single family home or two 2,000 square foot duplex units or 4 1,000 square foot fourplex units. And so that's a technique that's being used to encourage folks to kind of move to that higher density. That does ultimately, kind of bring up the question of, well, what if everybody just builds a 4,000 square foot house? And that is certainly a possibility. So we need to kind of work through how that might actually play out in practice. Another thing on there that you see on that screen is the potential for zone consolidation. Just the idea of having, instead of 4 different residential zone districts, having 1 or 2. And those 1 or 2 zone districts would be based on, a more broad density standard, or perhaps if you only had 1, not having a density standard, allowing the market to decide what needs to get built, and just providing standards for those constructions. So we've brought this up before, and I've made this presentation. I'm not going to continue to beat on this, but we do have the question of how we're handling ADUs and how House Bill 1110 addresses those, and the philosophical discussion of whether or not ADUs are even a thing anymore. And that did come up at the conference that we had some discussion on. Therefore, allowing for up to 4 units in a residential, or on a residential parcel, then an ADU really doesn't exist anymore. It's semantics at that point. You have residential units on a property. And so at this point, I think our ADU code is probably going to soldier on as it is until we figure out exactly what's going to happen with our other density standards, whether we choose the path of consolidating some of our residential zone districts, or if we choose a path of going down to a form-based code, or what it is that we do in that situation. We're just going to hold off on the ADU discussion. It's not really broken right now. It's just kind of awkward. And so we'll hopefully have a better solution for that in the near future. The state is going to provide a model ordinance to take a look at to see if a new ADU code is going to be appropriate. I have a feeling at this point that when we're being told that we're required to have 2 or more units per residential lot, then, like I said, I think the ADU is at this point kind of a question of semantics. So again, there are the possibilities of requiring up to 4 units per residential lot. That's dependent on some very specific requirements for affordability that I'm not sure will be a thing in the city of Oak Harbor. There are standards that are involved in that. We will have to allow for that and provide for the standards, but I don't know that a lot of people are going to take advantage of that, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to transfer it back to CAC at this point to talk about the multifamily tax exemption. I'll be back in a few minutes to talk about some other things, so we'll go from there.
Multifamily tax exemption, if you want to put that back on the screen for me, please.
Okay, sure will.
So the council asked me to bring this subject back to you so you could consider it with the contract extension for Hempstead Consulting. That's the firm we hired last summer, and we've extended the contract once already. We're asking you to consider extending this contract for another year to give us enough time to deal with all these density issues that we've been talking about today. There's a host of different things we need to do here, obviously. The numbers that CAC just gave you, that we would have to triple our development basically over the next 20 years in terms of the housing units we need to produce. We need to have incentives. We need some tools to be able to bring developers here to build the housing. We just don't have enough contractors. We don't have enough incentive tools. And so that's where this multifamily tax exemption program can help us. As you remember, the density question came up when we talked about it last time. And the question came up that 22 dwelling units per acre is all we allow in town. And under the program provisions, it seemed that 25 dwelling units an acre was the minimum in order to use the tax incentive program. Our consultants, after that meeting, they called the Department of Commerce and confirmed with them that Oak Harbor only needs 15. The reason there was confusion was because some of the training tools that Commerce had out said 15, some said 25, some of the provisions said 15, some said 25. So our consultants wanted more time to go back and talk to Commerce to clarify that for us. But even if it's 15 or it's 25, we need to add a lot of density here in town. We need to go higher in a lot of places in order to accommodate all these units. Because how are we going to build 5,000 units on the existing land that we have today? We're not going to be able to do it. We're going to have to densify in the central development area, which you all know, you've heard about, which is this area downtown here, and then up Midway to Highway 20, and then back downtown. That's a density area. Well, you'll see some 5-story buildings going in under a form-based code. And when you start seeing those kinds of redevelopments, it's going to take time, but that's going to help generate density in this part of town. We're also suggesting that we're going to need more density further out in some of the greenfield areas, as you heard Ray talk about. So that's a very important consideration for us to remember. And we're going to talk about the central development area next. So I just wanted to cover that basic concept with you. If you go to the next slide, please, Ray. So you always want to talk about the benefits of a program, because why else would you do something unless you can see a lot of benefits to it? So the multifamily tax exemption will bring about more housing overall, and that's what we need. It'll provide an incentive for developers to come here and receive a bit of a tax break. It provides additional construction sales tax and development fee revenue to help pay for itself. It'll bring more people living here that can visit local businesses, and that's something I think we all want. It provides higher population, which results in higher per capita payments back from the state, and so the revenue sharing will come back to us by having more population here. Those new residents are going to add more sales tax, are going to add the ability to pay for our infrastructure and our utilities. It's also going to bring more affordability in the long run. As we get more housing here, hopefully it'll bring some of the costs down for existing residents. And there's an affordability component in the multifamily tax exemption. We're not here necessarily today to talk about all the intricacies of the MFTE. When we come back with our consultant in January, we can do that. But again, our only intention is to get the contract extended so we can continue the conversation. And so I also mentioned higher density in the central development area. And that's our important target area we want to start with. So the next slide will be talking about the central development area. And so take it away.
Sorry about that. I was trying to get trying to get my screens all shuffled here. So yes, the central development area we've spoken about previously as part of the infrastructure discussion that Steve Schuler, our Public Works Director, had brought up. Some of the things that we've brought out of that are different concepts for trying to spur development in that area, including zoning enhancements and other kind of processes. But we see as staff potential for redevelopment and creating neighborhood focus there through the development of nodes. And one of those nodes is our downtown area, obviously, and another one is at Chimes Corner, which is the corner of Midway and East Whidbey. And so one of the concepts that we've taken a look at there, possibly, is to kind of expand the concept of the CBD zone district that I mentioned previously that doesn't have any upper limit for residential unit density, and applying that in certain areas to the central development area, including that node at the corner, at Chimes Corner there. And so what that would do is kind of create a secondary neighborhood kind of commercial area, potentially allowing for greater density in residential development while still maintaining the kind of small town look and feel that we all have grown accustomed to and enjoy here in the city of Oak Harbor. And so that's one possibility that we've looked at there. We have quite a really a very kind of high potential and really amazing opportunity at that corner, because we have property owners that could easily benefit from, kind of rethinking what their development pattern is and possibly, moving things around. And I'm speaking directly about a couple of parcels that are located on the south side of Whidbey Avenue there. But the concept is that if you have that development, that hopefully that will spur further development. If we can allow for greater density in certain areas, that will be a driver for having more residential units there, more people there, which will then be a driver for commercial development, which then, moves everything along, helps us with our infrastructure issues and that sort of thing. So we're working on coordinating efforts of our various stakeholders. We're in the very early stages of, kind of moving forward with some of these things. And this is a parallel process we see to the overall comprehensive plan changes. And so we're working on what we would consider to be kind of a sub-area plan to work on implementing some increased density, some design standards, and some other things to go along with that to kind of help Chimes Corner take off, to help our downtown take off, and to kind of move forward with some of these infrastructure issues, and at the same time working on getting some more residential units online. So again, this is a kind of coordination of efforts between several different parties, but again, we're looking at zoning changes, and this goes back to our increase in density, our potential for utilizing the form-based code, and all sorts of other things. So it's a big project, and like I said, it's going to go kind of parallel to the comprehensive plan process, but it will be eventually incorporated into that. And it kind of depends on how it all works out as far as a visioning process and kind of moving forward, if that gets folded into the comprehensive plan as it comes out, or if it's something that will be a comprehensive plan update in a following year. So that's just kind of an update of where we're going with that particular process.
Cool. If you can keep the slides on, Ray, we'll just keep rolling. So all the things that we have chatted so far is kind of under the umbrella of the 2023 comprehensive plan amendments. You can see how much work is being done under the umbrella of the comprehensive plan and how these flow from year to year. So most of the work that we're doing in 2023 regarding a lot of these topics that we just discussed will flow into 2024 and eventually into the 2025 update. So they're kind of connected with each other and form one large kind of sort of a work program. So what do we have? So anyway, I hope with that information between the what David presented, what Ray presented, and what I presented, kind of gives you an idea that going into the next couple of years of comprehensive plan updates, we're looking at major changes. We're looking at trying to support a lot of housing. We're trying to look at a lot of text amendments. We're trying to look for opportunities for redevelopment. And so there's a lot of things going on, and we have to find a way to organize that information so that it makes sense for the city, and then we can manage expectations and put our action plan together. Because there's so many planning efforts going on at the same time, we don't want to lose track of how to implement these projects. And unless we have kind of a methodical approach to it, we'll just have plans and a lot of ideas and find it difficult to implement. So as we go into 2024, now we have done the annual call for applications. And usually the call for applications, we get applications for land use changes. In the past few years, at least since our 2016 update, since we amended our land use map, we have had less and less applications because we generalized our land use. However, I got an email actually yesterday from a local developer asking me about the 2024 application, and has informed me that they are going to try and file a couple applications and ideas maybe for land use change. And I'm not sure what properties they're thinking about, but when the applications come in, we can take a look at it to see how we want to best address them. Now, if we weren't doing any of the major changes that we were talking about, density changes, zoning consolidation, form-based code, these are all major changes to our existing way of doing business. If we are entertaining any of those changes, then we have to see how an application for a land use change fits in with all the other changes that we're doing. So it's kind of a tricky period when you want some change that you're looking for your property, but at the same time, the city is going through a major update of its entire plan, thinking about maybe redesignating properties, like I said, consolidating zoning, or as Ray mentioned, extending the CBD zoning to other areas. These are all zoning changes that can impact properties and can impact an application. So we have to wait to see what application we get in, and we kind of have to then determine how it best fits into our 2025 update and other updates we're doing with the city, and see what makes sense. So we do have the application form out. We do have the process started. However, I think anything that we get in 2024 will likely be combined with the 2025 update, and any change that they're considering will be either considered in the major update by itself, or it may have to be considered as a separate action. So it's kind of a tricky time, but anyway, we're still keeping that option open for residents of Oak Harbor to apply for. Next slide. Thank you. Sorry, I'm changing my slides here, thinking it's changing over there. So it's not. 2025 major updates. So this is the state mandated update that will probably all cities and counties in Washington are gearing up. Everybody has different dates. Some are on 26, some are on 27. Island County is 2025. We have obtained some Department of Commerce grant to do a major update. We also had some grant money for the climate change requirement policy considerations that the state is requiring. So we will likely use those grant dollars to hire consultants to help us with those efforts. Again, as you mentioned, I just gave you, we just went over a large amount of information and big topics that can impact the future of Oak Harbor. It'll be good to have consultants that help us, whether it's for analysis, plan production, any public input process, so on and so forth. We could use consultants to help us because we are taking on a lot of changes in this update. So we can expect to hire consultants at the beginning of 2024. Once we have the consultants on board, then we will start to do the update, and the update would be a major effort. We have to ask ourselves whether we want to go through a visioning exercise. With all the changes, with the allocations, 5,000 plus units potentially, and with all the legislature changes, with the higher density, this is a chance for Oak Harbor to kind of reinvent itself, if you will, or kind of do a revisioning process to see where you want to go with the town, the density, the look, and so on. So if we undertake that, that will be a major public input effort in itself. That will drive the comprehensive plan. So we have to see how that fits into the scope and whether we have time to do it and how we accommodate that. But I would recommend doing it because it is a big change, and Oak Harbor is going to grow, at least at the pace at which we're asked to grow. It can be changing of our physical environment and just the look of the city. We want to, the current comprehensive plan has been in place for more than 25, 30 years. It's been amended, changed around a little bit here and there. Most of the policies are still good. but we could use an overall of the entire document and make it a little more, make it maybe simpler, more user-friendly, and so on. So we can definitely attempt to do that. Like I said, again, there are so many new ideas, the central development ideas, the how to accommodate housing densities. The MFTE program can have many ideas in the sense you can have, because we need development at a certain pace. We don't want to kind of sometimes leave the market to determine that. The market can be up or down. So we should do what we can as a city to try and provide the incentives, as David was talking about. We need to incentivize people to come and build here, and we need a lot of units. And so trying to accommodate ideas like expiring zones. So if you have an area that is designated to receive multifamily tax exempt projects, but that area is going to be available only for a short period of time, let's say 3 years, 5 years or something, then that puts a clock on a certain area and a certain incentive, and that can drive development decisions to be made faster because some incentives are expiring. So we need to think creatively in terms of how do we entice development to occur in Oak Harbor, where do we want it to go? We have to plan for all of this. So we have a major undertaking over the next year, year and a half with the 2025 update. We're going to get a lot of help from consultants throughout this project. We have a lot of planning efforts, a lot of ideas. What I'm trying to do within the city is to make sure that when we take public input for a lot of these projects, it can be confusing. We're doing a comp plan update, we're doing climate change, we're doing CDA development. Any of these, when we go out to the public and ask questions, they could seem similar, they could seem confusing. So what we're trying to do is to try and develop a good schedule where people can differentiate between a comp plan update or between providing input for climate change or providing input for your Chimes Corner or your downtown. All these processes will have to have separate public inputs. You can't combine them, primarily because some of the grant dollars you cannot pay for a public input process from various grant money dollars. They have to all have their own process. And so in 2024, we're expecting a lot of public engagement for the major updates. And so we want to make sure that it is logical and that people can identify clearly what they're providing input for and have an idea of what it is that Oak Harbor is working on. So a lot of things, a lot of information, and we have taken a lot of time trying to deliver this information. Again, I have one more slide. Again, this is the same thing for climate change. And then, we will, in 2024 is packed, and with 2025, I think the next year and a half, we're going to see a lot of great ideas come for how we need to manage all of this information and shepherd it through the public input process and eventually get to the decision makers, which is you as council members and planning commissioners, to decide, what is the best interest for Oak Harbor and how we should move forward. So with that, we have given you an hour and a half of a lot of information. We can close this presentation. I will hand it back over to David for some final comments. I am going to come upstairs and join the workshop setting so that we can have a discussion, a face-to-face discussion. But this ends our presentation and we can start our discussion. So back to you, David.
Thank you, CAC. I want to thank all of you for enduring these chairs. This is always a challenge, for me anyway. While CAC is coming upstairs, I wanted to clarify one of his comments on the multifamily tax exemption. What he was referring to there, where it's only a 5-year life, the state law has a code provision where it says there's only so many years left to actually initiate a multifamily tax exemption program. And so the clock is running in order to get the program started. Once you get it started, then of course there's an 8-year program, as you know, and a 12-year program and a 20-year program, and some of those can be extended. But there is a short clock on getting the stuff started, and I think, if it's something that you want to pursue, the incentive-based nature of it is what we'd want to get going sooner rather than later in order to get something to happen. So that's the one clarification I wanted to make, and I thank you all for taking the time to learn about density, and I'm just curious, how many of you have seen a presentation or are familiar with form-based codes? Looks like a few of you, which is great. Form-based codes is a totally different way to do zoning and development. So probably what we should do is come back to you at some point with a form-based code description, pictures, how it works, and give you some ideas, because that's a new process we've been exploring for the last several months. Our newest planner, Nolan Grunska, is helping us develop that program, as well as CAC and Ray, who's a design guy. So those are the kinds of things that we probably should come back and circle back with you fairly soon. And so thank you again for your attention, and Mr. Mayor and Commissioner Plumley, it's your meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Cool, and your team for that presentation tonight. Before we open the floor for questions from the commissioners and council members, I'd like to offer, Mr. Mayor, any comments or questions that you may have?
I really don't have any questions. I'm excited to hear that we have more applications, more opportunity. I do believe that, I've been in business here for many years, and I'm not going to blame a lot of this on COVID, but I think we had some builder developers that were trying to figure out how they were going to wind their businesses down, and that time period, I don't feel like we've had the activity that maybe is now happening again. So it's exciting to hear this. It will come with a lot of decisions, opportunities, and, we'll have to try to manage it as best we can. But we'll see a different landscape in Oak Harbor in the years to come. There's no question in my mind about that. And again, I agree with Commissioner Plumley. Thank you for the presentation. It was put together well. And I think when you bring us these opportunities, and especially it will help us if you can tell us how these tax exemptions can really work. Give us an example, and I can tell you also that I know we have some additional builders now that are back in the game here, and I know we will have builders from outside the city come, because when the opportunity's here, we will have builders, developers. So thank you, and when you can help us understand that tax exemption better, and I think our builders and developers will see it too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to open up the floor for questions and also invite City Council to ask any questions or comments you have as well. Commissioner Chazar?
Sure. I guess we'll start off with the one thing that the council wanted us to address is our opinion on extending the contract for MFTE. I'll share my opinion. I believe that we should extend the contract. I still believe that there still needs to be a lot of clarification on the exemptions and this tax spread that hopefully we'll avoid. And I think our consultants can help us with that. They've started by showing all the, by our request to show us all the benefits of this program. And hopefully at some point in time, we can get our county commissioners or the decision makers on this tax exemption or tax spread to join us in a workshop or a council meeting so that we can have a joint conference about what we're going to do with this tax and hopefully not spread it upon our taxpayers. So it's my opinion that we should extend it.
Thank you. Yes. Blaine.
The scenes, I'm trying to give direction to staff here. One of the things that may be helpful, the urban growth area or UGA was discussed in the joint planning area. So the joint planning area is a wider area where we plan together, and in the county, when they have activity in the area, they come and talk to the city about it. The urban growth area is a future annexation area. We can only annex areas in the urban growth area. And so Ray's going to show you the map here. The blue area here is our joint planning area. And then the smaller area is in the city limits or is in our urban growth area, which is a smaller area, very specific on what we do. We have areas on the edge that are on city limits that are actually the joint area, the urban growth area is actually the city limits sometimes. And so that's specific areas where we can annex on that area. Any development that happens in that area, we have some people who came to the council and were trying to annex, or didn't want to annex in the city, but the issue was, is that they were in the joint planning area. The city had the right to annex them. In this particular area of a 2.5 acre lot, it didn't make sense for us to annex. So for them to go through with the development in the county, the city had to waive it. So it was kind of backwards. But we have control over those areas, and so we have, a lot of times we'll have housing or we'll have a development. Somebody wants an industrial area on the west side of Goldie Road is not in city limits, but it's in our urban growth area. And so for them to develop that area under our agreement with the county, the city has the right to force them to annex in it, or we can waive it and continue it. I mean, I think for the planning point of view, it's better to connect to our services and be in the city limits, and that's why the urban growth area is designed to be that way. So hopefully that kind of helps you and gives you a little visual here on the map and a little bit more explanation of this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes. Commissioner Boyle.
I had a question about two groups and whether we're working with them. Obviously, anything we're thinking is going to affect Oak Harbor School District, and I don't know how tight the connection is there. And the other one is us having water for all of these new houses, because we don't own that water. We get it from Anacortes, isn't that correct?
We do coordinate, and we'll bring in the school district. The area, central development area, is another area I want the staff to show you the map of. I think some of the council and some of the plan commissioners were on our joint meeting, kind of familiar with, but some of you are new and maybe not under that area. And in our central development area that we've kind of designated is mostly schools. One of the largest property owners in that area, so part of the reason why they want a school out on Fort Nugent is because they got all their schools are clustered together and they kind of want to move them out. So if we talk about our redevelopment area, and you can see this is the blue map. I'll just go to the maps here. So as we kind of talk through here, this is kind of our preliminary area here is the area in green here. And that's our targeted area. It's our oldest area in the city. It's the area where our public works director talked about the decay in infrastructure and severe decay in infrastructure and was quoted on it. So our idea here is to really do two things at the same time, is to drive development for affordable housing, and then also as that density, they have to pay additional fees for connection, and we use that money from the private for the developments to upgrade the infrastructure in these areas where it's the oldest. So it's kind of a catch-22 when we're doing two things at the same time. And part of that density is to bring up the 5-story building and make that more amenable. So fortunately, we have a lot of other municipalities that have done this successfully, and so we're kind of plagiarizing their plan in doing this area. And then this will be an area where we might reach out some, but in the multifamily taxes, I mean, you have a residential target area we talk about, and so definitely this will be the primary area. And then we talked about other areas where we can reach out. Would we want the density in the whole city, and we'll have to kind of develop those areas, but I think we want to do it. And one thing I talk about economic development is the market's not doing it. And so economic development is putting incentives and doing things that the market's not doing. If the market was creating the homes that we need and the affordability, then this wouldn't be a government problem, but it isn't. So government's trying to step in on the state, federal, and local level to address these concerns.
So could I, Commissioner Gore, we had a meeting with the school district today, I believe. We do communicate with them often. As it pertains to water, we have, the last time we checked with the city of Anacortes, we asked about 1,500 homes at that time, and there's no shortage of water to serve additional. And I don't know whether you know it or not, but we buy, as does La Conner, our water from Anacortes. But they also sell water to the 2 refineries over there who use more than we do. Each of the refineries do, yeah. So I'm only saying that, you know, as the refinery business potentially might change, there might even be more water. There is no shortage of water.
Yeah, the interesting thing, I don't know if I had the statistics exactly sure, but in close to it, is the major producers there, the refineries, they use 70% of the water. That's around that amount. The city of Oak Harbor uses about 15%, and Anacortes uses about 15%. I may be off plus or minus 10%.
Actually, Blaine, yeah, I have the numbers, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, the city of Anacortes retails 11%. The city of Oak Harbor is 11%, and the 2 refineries combined are close to 70%. And there's some other small users in addition to that, so, yeah.
Yeah, and then we did do a tour of their plant. They built a modern, very modern plant, Anacortes did, in Mount Vernon, so that's where you got to go for it. And so they've got huge water rights to draw there, and then the idea we have here is, well, we don't have people on the well water, then it charges the wells. And so that's the idea you have, because if we did had a catastrophic thing where the pipes coming under the bridge came and weren't there, then we would draw in the short term on the wells. And so the rest of the county, unfortunately, they're tapping we're in an area where it's a protected, or it's a difficult, I'm trying to think of the word here while I'm talking to you, but it's yeah, aquifer. It's a critical aquifer. That's the word I was looking for. It's a critical aquifer because it's got salt water on both sides and such. And so there is already developments that are polluting their own. They have too much density on top of their wells and are polluting it. So us having the well water coming in, and then we also have it's expensive, but we have a clean water facility on the sewer side, and we're doing nutrient free. We don't have all the problems with the sewer discharge on there. So we're set up very well for growth.
Thank you. Any other questions? I have just a couple then, real quick. For the HAPT, does the HAPT account for our military population and potential changes in that? And does it account for potential end of life of buildings that already exist? I know, for example, on the base, that's a pretty aged infrastructure. If they don't build houses to replace those, does that tool account for that? Or are those numbers that we're looking at not inclusive of that situation?
I think the tool is very generalized, but we can customize the tool for our purposes. So there is some flexibility in the allocation and how we assign percentages that can compensate for all the things that you mentioned. One of the ways that the countywide planning group is looking at how to allocate these housing units that for Island County is to get away from the population methodology and go into the employment methodology. And so even though the base is technically in the county, we're going to consider it to be as part of the base. And so when you look at that aspect of it, then Oak Harbor has like the largest employment center on Island County, and therefore can take a lot of that accommodation. So irrespective of whether the base is growing or not, I think we're just saying
Island County has, they've given us the projection for the entire Island County, which includes the base. And so we're just taking a large portion of that. And so any expansion in the base or anything that happens in the next 20 years is probably, hopefully, accommodated in that population projection already there.
Thank you, I appreciate that. My second question, I'm sorry, is it was mentioned that the ADUs may just become 4 residential units on a given piece of land. Would that potentially open residents up to having 4 tax assessments? Could that?
Well, it depends on how the units are developed. So you can have one ownership, 4 units, which will be the same way taxed. Or if people want to condominiumize it, then you'll have 4 parcel numbers on one, 4, and so that's how the taxing will work, depending on how the ownership pattern.
So when they go and put the 4 units on there, if they're not calling them auxiliary dwelling units anymore, they would have to declare at that time that they don't intend to sell them, they're going to stay one single unit? Or I'm concerned that if we remove the designation of auxiliary dwelling unit, it might cause some confusion with the county with the county assessor as to when it's 4 units and when it's 1 unit.
Yeah, I think the assessment every year will take into account all those changes. So if we have subdivisions that go through that divide up an existing property into 2, let's say for 2 duplexes over 2 townhomes, then we'll be part of that subdivision process, and so will the county, and so they'll have a chance to assess it at that point. If a house goes from 1 unit to 4 units, there's going to be a building permit that is associated with it that changes that use, and so that will be used again to determine the change from the 1 unit to the 4 unit, and the assessment will be done, tracked in that way. So there will be some change in how it's assessed, but hopefully we'll track when and how those units are changing.
Okay, thank you. My last question, with the multifamily tax exemption, and if we go to this form-based code where, as I understood it, you would be given a 4,000 feet, or 4,000 square feet, I believe was what was used. Could we add into that exemption, into the policy, that exemption could be rescinded should a developer develop an Airbnb, basically, right? If they were to build 4 or 8 500 square foot units that with the intention of Airbnb-ing them out, could we have something in that policy that says if it's not used for long-term housing, that exemption does not apply?
So the base foundation for form-based code is the city has the ability to regulate the form of the building and where it sits maybe, and how it interfaces with the street. And it has less to do with how that building is used. So you're regulating the physical environment, not necessarily how it's used exactly within that form. So if somebody builds a form that looks like a house, because that's kind of what we wanted to, for 10 years it could be 4 units inside that, and after 10 years somebody can come and make the downstairs into an office and the upstairs into a living space. That form, outside form, will remain the same. Inside, the uses can change through all the uses that are allowed in that particular zone. And so you're regulating just the form and not the use. So whether it's an Airbnb or whether it's any other use, you can use the same form but have these different uses. You don't have to specifically exempt anything. We're trying to be more of a allowing code to give property owners the flexibility to use their property in many ways, and limiting the impact by just regulating the form. That's basically how the form-based code works.
So if we increase the number of units, then we're kind of accommodating the natural market of the Airbnbs. But without doing the units that we have, what right now is Airbnbs are taking affordable housing. That's what people are converting into it. So Oak Harbor hasn't had a major problem with it, and we haven't done a zone, but I know Coopville has. I know we have a gentleman here that's very familiar with that, and Langley has. And I came from a community where it was a really big deal. So fortunately, we've been okay here, and we haven't had complaints about people with changeover and those kind of things here. But I think as CAC's saying, if we get our units up, then I think we'll have accommodations and we won't have to be as strict with usage and that kind of thing. So, but that's certainly something, if it became a problem in the short term, we may look at it, but I haven't had major complaints about people, and we haven't had major conversion as some of the smaller towns and cities in Island County have.
So
If I may address something real quick too, the 4,000 square foot FAR is a strictly hypothetical thing. That was just an example that was used during a discussion at the planning conference. It's not necessarily something that we're going to use. It was just an example of an example property of land that had 4,000 square feet of available developable floor area. And so it was strictly hypothetical, not giving an example of any particular property or any regulation that we're considering right now.
Thank you. I apologize for my confusion with the zone-based code. My bigger question that I'm trying to figure out here is, if we go to the multifamily tax exemption and we build multiple units with the purpose of getting more housing in the community, some of that being affordable, right? Do we have any mechanism to ensure that a developer doesn't come in, build multiple units, collect that tax exemption, and then turn around and basically run a hotel by Airbnb-ing out all of those units?
Correct. We do have the ability to write our own rules in this program, so we'll write an ordinance that will establish rules that we want to see. So if you want to see the ability to limit Airbnbs in this program, you can. And so it is a 20-year or a 12-year tax exemption, or even an 8-year tax exemption. So they have to follow that particular program.
And one of the things we talked about in the presentation when we talked about it is that there's going to be a burden on the city to manage the program, and we may use a consultant or debt to make sure these very things don't happen, because this is really not about creating more Airbnbs. This is creating units of housing is what we're trying to do here.
So to augment on what Blaine was just talking about, the city will have to have some staff dedicated to help with this, but typically what you do on affordable housing programs is you require the developer to do their own accounting analysis every year. So they hire an independent accounting firm to come in and analyze to make sure the people that are there to be subsidized, that they're still justified to be in there as an affordable housing component, and that they're still renting it for what they're supposed to, and that they're still paying their taxes and doing all the things they're supposed to do. So an independent firm is hired by the developer to do that. So it's not a burden of the city to do that. And then they'll file a report every year with us so that we can make sure that it's being done.
Thank you for that and for answering those questions for me. Any other, Commissioner Chesa?
Just a couple housekeeping things. So if we go to 5 stories, is Chief Merrill comfortable with the current equipment he has for 5 stories? Didn't want Mr. Stuckey to get a request for a $250,000 fire truck. The other question I have is, I saw the presentation on Pioneer Way 2029. I believe the roundabout at 20 and Pioneer is going to be done in 2027. Is there any way we could incorporate the gateway to downtown into the 2027 roundabout and get hopefully get the state to pay for part of that gateway?
Certainly open to that idea. It's going to be started to design in 2027 and build out as 2030. Sorry, push it back.
Okay, I'm okay for 2029 now. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? All right, well, seeing none then, we will I will invite the mayor to adjourn the council meeting.
Well, then, with that, just before I do that, I want to say I'm excited to see a full planning commission. Thank you all for stepping up and accepting and doing what you do. Thank you. I'm excited about that. And with that, unless there's something from council.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were just done with the planning commission's
Oh.
questions. Is that?
I'm ready to
Okay.
adjourn. I'd love to have you.
Well, now that everybody's excited about going home,
Yes, please do.
I want to hold up the show. Not much, though.
I didn't put the pizza order in yet.
Okay, all right, okay, right.
He's still
We've
got
got,
half
yeah.
hour, 45 minutes.
So, I really only have two questions. First, Cap, you spoke about pushing growth into the areas that we want. And, trying to kind of control the distribution of the higher density housing. Aside from zoning or code or tax incentives, how can we as a city do that? How can we control distribution or encourage growth in specific areas, kind of outside of the planning model? Because I'm looking up, the form-based zoning and the multifamily tax exemption and a lot of that stuff. It's just too new for us to really know how effective it's going to be. So I'm kind of thinking if we stack everything we've got at this problem, then we might be able to get some payoff.
Yeah, good question. Zoning has been the traditional tool, been used for many years, tested in the courts and whatnot through a 100-year implementation of comprehensive plans and zoning. And like I mentioned earlier, they work for organically growing. You designate areas and then you let the market and property owners decide which direction is going, and it's a good balance between what you regulate, property owners, their rights, and so on. But you never always end up where you envision because there's so many factors that can change the route on the way there, and so that's why you do your plan updates and so on. Now in Washington, just because of the demand for housing and the need for affordability, the state is pushing these tools down on us that we have to use. Now, I think MFTE and other programs, they've been used in other states successfully. I think there are some tools that are being brought to Washington only recently, and it's being new in Washington, but I think some of these tools have been used in other parts of the country already and have successes. How do we target, or how do we get density where we want to at the time that we want to? That's still an art that everybody is trying to determine. Everybody in Washington is having the same problem because everybody has these allocations, and everybody is required to say, where are your 0 to 30% AMI, your 30 to 50 AMI, where are they going to go? And we still, not all the cities still don't have the answers on how to exactly show that. Currently, we think that density is going to help. So we think if we have a higher density area, hopefully the housing costs will be lower. So that's kind of the general relationship we have. And so when we look at the 2025 update, when we look at our allocations, where are we going to put this additional 5,000 units? We'll have to look at our zoning map or whatever tool, whether it's form-based code, whatever it is that we want to call it. We have to look at, number one, the traditional tool of assigning zoning or visualizing density. We want density in downtown. That's usually where it is. We want it in the central area where we have transportation. That's for sure. But we also can support higher density in our greenfield development. We don't want low density to keep growing our cities out and making transportation corridors longer. So we want higher density in some of our outer lying areas. We also want some commercial areas. So, it's one step. You start to go where density is, and then you start to commercial property and whatnot. So how do we get density in these areas in this outside? And that's MFT is a great tool. And again, I brought up the time-based kind of exploration zones that you can offer as incentives, and you can target some areas for really high-density development and give it a certain time frame. Usually those clicking clocks are a great way for developers to make a decision, right? If you have a property that's available for tax exemption, it's going to be available for the next 25 years, what's the incentive for somebody to jump on it, right? They can come 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But if you say that that zone is expiring in 5 years, now somebody has to make that decision not on the 5th year, they may have to make that decision on the 3rd year so that they can get their project to a place where it can get approved and still meet that timeline. So that's one way of doing it, is to have the clock ticking for developers to make that decision. That's what we want to do. We want to see a pace of development. We want to see it fast. And we want to see it, and so we have to try our best to try and push people that way. So these incentives are the best way. I don't think we can require people to do certain things. I mean, a lot of Washington cities are going with minimum densities, requiring, like Anacortes, for example, you can't build another single-family home. You go in and you want to develop, they're asking for a minimum of certain density. Unless you have a minimum density, they're not doing pre-applications, they're not looking at your applications. So that's forcing you as a property owner to deal with only certain circumstances. We have certain flexibility here. We'd like to keep that and offer incentives, but we still want to kind of nudge people along to get that pace. And so we want to try, I mean, the expiring zones are just one example, but there are many other tools we can consider in doing that. The CDA is a great way. You can do planned actions, which is a tool that's available to all cities in Washington, where you plan for an area, and once you envision what it's going to develop into, the density, you can plan for it, and you can do all the environmental analysis ahead, so that when somebody comes in to do a development, all they have to do is pay a fee, and you already have a prescribed kind of formula. They know what to expect, and therefore things are predictable from their standpoint. And so these are some of the things that we can do to try and direct development to certain areas.
It might not be exactly the same thing, but is the Chimes Corner plan kind of an example of the planned actions where we kind of have in mind what we want to see happen in that area, and we're working with the property owners to make that happen?
It's one option.
Yeah.
So when you do a CDA, like an area development, it's just a matter of cost. Those things, it's just how much of an implementable document you want, how easy do you want to get it. And I think we want to not only just plan for the area and visualize the density, you want to take the additional steps of the environmental analysis and calculating the fee. You kind of determine, as you know, the CDA, the foundation is you want to try and get that infrastructure upgraded. You know, we own the infrastructure for city. That's the foundation. You want to have your infrastructure all functioning. You want it as new as possible to serve development. You know, that's the kind of service that the city wants to offer. Now, a lot of our infrastructure in that area is very old. And so how do we replace that? We replace that with redevelopment. We replace that with density. And so by targeting what density we want to see, then we can visualize or determine what infrastructure we need, then we can determine the cost of the infrastructure, and we can kind of disperse it with the density of that area. And so when somebody comes, and you can go as detailed as it's going to cost this much per unit. So somebody comes in with the 12-unit building, they know that they have this development fee that they have to pay, which is already calculated for them. So that's the ways of trying to get them to the door faster.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, that's mostly it. The rest of my questions are sort of already been answered. So just thank you to the Planning Commission. You guys do so much of our heavy lifting, and we really appreciate the recommendations that you put forward and the work that you put in. I know it's a lot. So thank you so much. We appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Anyone else? And at this time, I will adjourn the special meeting of the City Council.